DAO. I don't know what DAO is. I've read about it, but I would really love to know what is DAO on the blockchain space. Now, if this topic really interests you, please stay around, and we're gonna talk more about that. So, without further introduction, welcome to the block, ladies and gentlemen.
This blockchain continuing education program is brought to you by our major sponsors: HTML Coin, Utility Coin Beyond the Hype; Althash University, your online school in the fourth industrial revolution; Libra Codes, take control on your NFT creation; and Credence Hub, verified credentials, anytime, anywhere. We also would like to thank our partners.
By the way, I'm Doc Vince of ICORBP. I'm in the business development department of ICORBP, which is International Council of Registered Blockchain Professionals. Now, I'm going to introduce my partner here, co-host. She needs no further introduction, Dr. Tammy Francis.
Hello, how's it going?
Doing good, doing good. I mean, I'm so not just excited, but really interested on our topic for today, which is DAO. A lot of things, I guess we talk about blockchain so much, but DAO for me is another level. And we do have a subject matter expert who will talk more about what that is. So, I mean, everyone will be in for a treat, not just me. Welcome, Dr. Francis. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, great topic. Part of this show, for those of you, this is your first time joining us. I am Dr. Tammy. I am the director of accreditation and certification and curriculum and instruction. So I have two positions of ICORBP, the International Council of Registered Blockchain Professionals. And here on the block, what we like to do is highlight subject matter experts and from different areas so you can see the possibilities in this blockchain space, because it's so vast, and a lot of people come into it thinking you have to be a developer, you have to be a coder, and yes, those are options, and yes, there are jobs out there, and yes, if that's something you're interested, you can definitely pursue it. But there's other options, and I always share my journey and how I'm a non-tech person in this tech world. I'm an educator, and so and I come from it with a different angle, from a different perspective, and I've aligned it with what I do and in my day job before blockchain technology entered my world, and I have incorporated. And so that's something we like to do here, is just share with you the options. So you can, when you come to us, when you pursue additional training, whether it's through one of our partners, you know that there are options with that information, with that knowledge that you can do. And so I'm really excited to share our subject matter expert today and learn more along with you. So this is definitely going to be a treat. And one of the things that is really hot right now is the subject of DAOs. And I don't think Doc Vince mentioned it, but decentralized autonomous organizations and what that looks like. And of course, I have my questions around that, because what I have seen in this space as far as blockchain technology, how it relates to blockchain technology. But I know that our expert today does so much more than that, and has so many other topics that he can talk on as well. So we'll actually touch on some of the other things that he does as well. So this is going to be a great show. We look forward to you interacting with us. So here's my plug. Say hello to us in the comments. Make sure you tell us who you are and where you're joining us from. Maybe even an emoji if you don't have an opportunity to type a lot because you're at work or something else. But definitely say hello to us. And if you have any questions as we're going along, put them in the chat, because we'll make sure we always have a segment where we check out the comments and make sure we try to answer all the guests, those of you who are viewing, your questions. So make sure that you put those in the chat as we're going along. Doc Vince?
Yep.
I said a lot. And it's a Freudian slip. It's something when I say non-educator. I've been an educator so long, it's like I was born an educator. So when I said that, I was like, oh my goodness, we have to edit that, but we're not.
No. I can say anything more. I can say anything more, but I'm so excited to have our guest here. So help us welcome our guest, Professor Dr. Wulf Kaal.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Hello, how's it going?
Nice to see
So
you.
glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. So
Lovely.
tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Wulf Kaal, and I've been in this particular space on DAOs for about a decade now. I'm trained as a new institutional economist, and I wrote almost a decade ago an article on dynamical governance in a first shift for my PhD supervisor. And that kicked off a whole slew of new insights and new collaborations, including with mathematicians. And this article posits that we can actually govern ourselves and society in dynamical structures. So in this, if you've read New Institutional Economics, and I'm not going to go too deep into the theory, but it's all about institutions. How do you govern institutions, and what is important in governing institutions? And most of the literature until that point, until this article, has been about the limitations of stable and presumptively optimal rules in governing institutions, because we simply didn't have the technology to create dynamical frameworks for institutions, which includes DAOs. And because that technology wasn't available, people couldn't even theorize about what it would mean to have a dynamical environment for governance. Now, with the technology, we have this ability, and that's what I've been working and writing on for the last decade about. And I've been for about 3 years now implementing these insights in DAO environments. The design that I proposed in the book and various articles is now being used by 5 DAOs. Total assets about 250 million, given fluctuations in the market. And yeah, so ever since I've been in the implementation phase in the DAO environment. However, the implementation costs and the barriers to entry that come from those costs are just too high. I realized that about 2 years ago. And so for about a year now, I've been working on a company called Menagerie that is lowering the entry-level cost to allow communities to horizontally scale, meaning one community can create a new community with relatively low cost. Some people call them all DAOs. We're trying to get away from the word DAO now because it's an understatement in some ways, and it's also inaccurate on certain levels. So we're trying to figure out what we can use, what other terminology we can use to get away from all the DAO washing, all the things that are happening in the space right now. Because as you said in the intro, it's very sexy. But with sexy also in crypto often comes abuse, and you've probably heard about some of the DAO washing and some of the DAO failures. So it's important that we create a movement that has legs to stand on for the long term. And yeah, so that's what we're working on in Menagerie right now. I'll stop here.
No, awesome. Thank you. And so that's a perfect segue into what I wanted us to start with, because like you said, many of the DAOs, like it's decentralized as part of that, the acronym, right? However, many of them are centralized, and the way they look and function is very different from let me just say that the way I understand they should, and the way I believe they should. And so let's start there. Let's start. What is it? What, and your definition, let's start there. What it is, so that way we can unpack some of the things that you just said about what, the evolution of it and how we're looking at really breaking it down and describing it accurately. So let's start just with because some of our audience is very new to this space. So let's just start with basic definition.
Sure. Okay, so upfront, I want to say that intelligent minds beg to differ about the definition, if there is such a thing, of a DAO, right? Because the decentralized nature of the whole thing makes it so that people will disagree and bring different information to the attempt to try to define it, right? So, but a lot of people in the lay audience they typically, and there's people writing about this, they typically talk about words like, to describe DAOs, they use words like leaderless self-organizing, non-hierarchical, no CEO, which is implied in no leader, no investors with special rights, no board of directors, fostering, and then often fostering an advancement of justice, prevention of corruption on a global scale, right? So there's a lot of, in the mainstream media, crypto mainstream media that is, where these types of words are used to describe DAOs. And that is not wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it misses the mark in terms of what DAOs can actually do for humanity to some extent. And it only talks about the elements that we're using to distinguish ourselves as DAO communities from existing top-down hierarchical monolithic structures. Yeah. So when you go a little bit deeper, one of the things that drives DAOs is decentralized governance. And by the way, when we talk, you guys are the Blockchain Council, when we talk about blockchains and decentralized layer one solutions, they all need DAOs in the end, right? Because all of them need to figure out how to govern themselves. That's what DAOs do. DAOs are about governance. A lot of people think that DAOs are about raising funds because the first DAO was a fundraising vehicle. But ultimately, DAOs are about governance. DAOs are about giving humanity the ability to self-organize away from or without the centralized structures that we have built to govern society, right? So this is a vehicle. Once decentralized governance has legs, if you want, that helps communities create and self-govern without the centralized top-down hierarchical structures in which a lot of people don't have agency. Yeah, so that's this, and that's a very, very important piece in defining DAOs. DAOs need to have the ability to bring information from the edges of the system, right? Bring in people and give people agency who currently don't have agency in existing centralized top-down hierarchical structures. Yeah, and so that is the key in DAO governance, right? So DAOs have to have the ability to bring people in from the edges and information from the edges that is currently not allowed and possible by centralized monolithic structures, and they have to have the ability to govern these people in the DAO in a decentralized environment, right? And that's all I personally care about. Of course, people bring me into different contexts, and there's fundraising issues, et cetera, et cetera. But at the core, when we talk about the long-term benefit of these new structures for society, it is about self-organizing, and it's about attack resistance and stability in organizing communities. So that's where most of my work has been in the last decade. It's about DAO governance and the key features of DAO governance that are important for longevity of these community structures, right? And once we figure this out, and this is all still experiments, right? So Menagerie has a key equilibrium model that we're offering, but every community still experiments with DAO governance and how they want to self-organize. The problem is that the 10,000 or more DAOs that exist today, and we'll probably have 20, maybe 30,000 by the end of the year, because as you said, it's sexy right now. Most of them use structures such as Snapshot and others that have a very rudimentary, basic governance structure that is akin to centralized governance structure, right?
Yes.
If you bring these centralized governance structures to this new vehicle, you are basically just perpetuating the old structure, top-down monolithic power hub, right? And that you can do that, and people are doing that, right? Snapshot is extremely popular, great vehicle, by the way. I'm all in support of it. I just wish to help people bring new long-term sustainable governance solutions to this environment. I'll be quiet now and let you ask some more questions. Sorry. I like to talk.
No, I'm loving this. I'm loving this. You talk as long as you like, because this is really good information. Because the same things you were saying is what I believe about this space is that, many people are bringing that centralized Web 2 ideas to this space.
Yeah.
And I really like that you said this, and I'll be tweeting this out. So, so just know that DAOs should bring in people and information from the edges. I love that. I love that, because much of what I do with Black and Brown communities is talking about this idea of sovereignty and all these things that are connected to what we believe about the blockchain, to also thinking about these communities that we're building and creating. And so I love that. DAOs should bring in the people and information from the edges. I love that. Okay, so all right, so I guess I'm interested, because you said that you have assisted with at least, it's maybe more, 5, I believe, DAOs in the development
every
of
week something new happens.
Yeah, yeah, like it's something different. So I'm really curious, and because I know that, like you said, each one kind of does something different with their governance. What are some things that you've seen in creating and helping and assisting people with these structures that have worked and that really maintains the integrity of what was, the definition we're working with in this show today, which I agree with and I believe about DAOs. How are you doing that? How is that working? What are some ways that it's working? Because this centralized model is really what I've seen so much of lately, as we've gone from a few to, like you said, 30, 20, 30,000 communities that people are building.
Yeah. So for me, this all started in the implementation phase about 3 years ago with a DAO that's called the DevX DAO that I co-founded. And this is a DAO that is funded to build decentralized infrastructure with code. Okay, but as you know, this is often driven by layer 1. So the purpose here of this DAO was to be agnostic and independent of layer 1 pressure points, to help build decentralized infrastructure. And the reason why I joined it is because I recognize that all the theoretical constructs and the math models that I've been working on for almost a decade, that's all great. And in the model, you can see how this works, but and you can see where there's equilibrium in the model, but it means very little unless people use it and the model is proven with data to be stable and equilibrium, right? That's why I joined the DevX DAO, because I wanted to show the world that this is possible. You can use these structures with decentralized governance and bring in information from the edges and create a sustainable environment and a sustainable model for society to govern itself. So this is a grassroots democracy type approach with decentralized governance. And it's all about governance, right? This is not about fundraising and allocation. And you have to understand all the bad things that humans do, they try to creep back in, right? So there is, attempts at corruption, there is identifying, trying to do deals with each other, influencing voting outcomes, all these horrible things that we do. And all of the things that work in DAOs, they're still nascent. We're still all babies in this. Yeah. So what we need to collect data. We need to give people an equilibrium model and nudge them into proper governance. And again, when we do this at Menagerie, we are saying, hey, here's a free DAO voting engine. Use it. Oh, you don't like the equilibrium model? Go change it. It's your call. We're giving you an equilibrium model that we know has legs in the model, that is a sustainable model. But if you don't want to do it this way, the way we're recommending, it's your community choice, right? We're not telling you what to do. You can do whatever you want with it. Yeah. So okay, let me go back. So DevX DAO, that's where it all started. DevX DAO was seeded and funded by a layer 1 called Casper Labs. They dedicated 16% of their assets to the DevX DAO, which was wonderful because they were very, very motivated people who believe in decentralization. Defining decentralization is another ticket, but they seeded the DAO, and the DAO was and is agnostic in building decentralized infrastructure. And DAOs are all about decentralized infrastructure building. I want to be really clear. That's why I'm in this particular DAO, because we need to build decentralized infrastructure for DAOs and DAO communities. Because once we have DAOs working with proper governance, the way DAOs can interact with each other and how we can reinvent society in this only works if you have infrastructure. So we're talking about basic infrastructure such as electricity, and I'm analogizing here, right? So this, what we're building here is what society has built after the Industrial Revolution. So we're talking about equivalency of the telegraph, the basic the locomotive, right? Steam engines. We're talking about electricity, et cetera, right? So these are all ancillary systems that need to be built in order to allow DAOs and the DAO environment, the DAO origins to flourish, if you want. Yeah, and so the DevX DAO helps do that, and is giving out grants for developer communities and developer teams to build that decentralized infrastructure, right? So let me give you an example. And by the way, the DevX DAO uses the decentralized governance model that I described in my book. Yeah. So decentralized infrastructure is all about creating the environment and the tool sets that allow different DAO communities to engage with each other, right? Now, sometimes people, because often it can be about money and making direct money, right? So sometimes we see decentralized infrastructure in DeFi being built, and DeFi is an important vehicle, guys. I want to be very clear here. I'm not critical of DeFi. I support all of the DeFi efforts, but that's just an ancillary system for the larger vision in which we can reform the way society operates, right? So DeFi is a great mainstream toolset driver, and DevX DAO has been building a lot of DeFi products. But we're also sponsoring things like a legal system for DAOs, right? So right now, DAOs, and this was raised earlier, don't have the tool sets in smart contracts to give humanity and people, business parties in smart contracts, the ability to litigate this in legal environments, right? So it's very very expensive. There's a huge threat that existing courts will identify DAOs as partnerships and treat people who are coordinating their conduct in smart contracts accordingly, right? So one infrastructure piece that is very important, by the way, that's where I, as a law professor, was kicked off, if you want, many years ago, is this idea that we need a smart contract arbitration platform where people who write smart contracts and people who are doing business with each other through smart contracts, if something goes wrong, and things go wrong all the time, that they have the ability to litigate this in an efficient outcome pool driven by smart contracts itself, not, hey, you have to take this to court and it's going to take you 2 years and cost you $2 million. Okay, so that, I'm just giving you an example, and there's so many different kinds of infrastructure pieces that we need to build around for and with DAOs, right? And most of them have a governance need internally, right? So when you see these new communities flourish, they're being plugged into all kinds of business constructs right now, and all have at the core the need to have decentralized governance, and that's why DAO governance is so important. And DAO governance is, if you want, at the heart of Web3. Web3, in my opinion, is impossible without decentralized DAO governance. So it's all when we talk about Web3, all of the outcomes that people are building, at the core, in the end, they require decentralized DAO governance.
Yes. Oh, make sure I'm off mute. Yes, I definitely agree with that. Because I think of Web3 as this community, and so because of that, part of that is that governance. So that was good. Armando, you're here. Did you have a question?
Yes, I do have questions. So, Dr. Professor Kaal, he made mention before about um, changing the term DAO. So, this is my question. What lead you believe that DAO movement or concept is currently evolving? Given in your experience that you've been giving advice, advice to various organizations, why is there a movement to modify the name DAO to fit into the reality?
So thank you, Armando, and nice to see you again. We've been meeting regularly years ago, and here we are again on a channel. Happy to see you. So thank you, Armando. Great question. So the original DAO that led to the Ethereum fork was a fundraising DAO. And when we talk about new solutions for society, we like to tap into this word DAO, decentralized autonomous, right? Which is a sort of a key component here. Unfortunately, we see a lot of people now using the word DAO and going back to the fundraising understanding of this vehicle, and not to the societal long-term sustainable governance solution idea, and ideas such as work to earn, right? Which is so allowing people to use these structures to make a living outside of the existing hierarchical structures where a lot of people have no agency, right? That is really the core of the movement, but the word DAO is often associated with fundraising, and fundraising here is monolithic top-down vertical scaling, right? So they're looking for the next Facebook. They're not looking for a horizontal scaling solution where communities seed new communities and they do work with each other, and people in these communities are allowed to make a living outside of the existing top-down structures, right? So we're talking about Axie Infinity. I don't know if you followed this, right? This is a game. This is a play to earn, where people in Southeast Asia, millions of people are making a living in Ethereum by playing this game. Now you can say, well, they're slaves to the game, and there's a little truth in that. But they're paying the milk for their babies with this game. Yes. They're not working for the man. They're working with each other in the game to make a living, and that's the future. That's what DAOs do. That's how DAOs need to be organized. But again, you can only get to work to earn, which is what Menagerie is all about, helping people to create work to earn solutions. You can only get there if you have decentralized governance that gives you sustainable incentives to work with each other and for each other and to make a living in DAO structures. Yeah. So back to your question, when we are talking about this, most people don't talk about DAOs in work to earn in a work to earn context, which we should, right? So maybe the word DAO is wrong here. Maybe we need to talk about work to earn, right? And sustainable community solutions, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying I know the word that we should be using. I just know that a lot of people, when they talk about DAOs, they talk about making money, right? In centralized new structures where we have rent seeking and discrimination and all these things that are happening, right? That's not what this should be about. It should be about work to earn, people being freed from oppressive environments in which they have no agency, and having the ability in these new structures to work together and make money and a living for their babies. Milk on the table. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
Right. I like the idea DAO as a mechanism or tool for social good. I like that. You see, because the same thing in the mother umbrella, which is blockchain, and DAO, DeFi are part sectors of the blockchain space. So it seems to me, and it's still a struggle for us as pioneers in different field within the blockchain space, because the whole blockchain narrative is still guided on the idea of digital assets, on cryptocurrencies and fundraising, blockchain as a financial tool. But they did not see that the other, those are just 5% of the uses of blockchain. And, there are many faces, specifically in the DAO environment. You as a pioneer, and authority is also advocating, DAO is not all about fundraising, but you can use it to do social impact for political structure, so on and so forth. So I really like that. So I'm sure there are many questions in the panel. Professor Johannes, though you have a question, but yeah, I like the idea. We have to push, as a pioneer in this field, that now it's not all about fundraising. There are other things that we can do, such as doing in the social good, and I think Dr. Tammy Francis is within also an advocate with that, because she's been building communities of color. You've been invited in Africa to be a speaker. So we should be starting to push for a DAO narrative in social good. Thank you.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I see some of them happening because I have been invited to assist with the development of some of these DAOs, and but there's still this centralized governance. Like, even though they're not necessarily in it for the fundraising aspect, and they're doing it for such a good, even the governance is still off. Like, there's always something that doesn't maintain the integrity of what it is, and so all of that, I think, is a part of it. So Jodo, did you have a question?
Hi guys.
Hi.
Really interesting to proceed even with the DAO concept to make it more broader or even more specific one. So, but in general, I have a twofold question. The first would be like, are there visible new approaches in how to deal, especially with these proceduralized concepts of the distributed thing, how to deal with the standardized, usual, since ever happening social aspects? Like there are people trying to build up oligarchies, or just buying votes, or how to deal in these means, or are there ways visible to deal with the standardized social issues? And the second one would be, are there ways visible to make this constructs, not only DAOs, but even the next step of them, aligned to normal legal systems, as the standard DAO at the moment has big issues, even up to holding each member liable. So are there new approaches somehow in reach to make this more pleasant for the standard participant of these social environments? So thank you guys.
Thank you. Dr.
So
Kaal.
do you want me to take this?
Yes.
Okay, so on the legal side, the social side is that's we need to dig in a little bit more with the question. But on the legal side, there is quite a bit of movement in the DAO space. Let me start with America. In America, we have 3 jurisdictions that are very, very pro-DAO, which is Washington State, Pennsylvania. Both have co-op laws that are currently being experimented with for DAO environments. And I want to be very clear, this is very important. The legal wrapper solution for a DAO has to be congruent with the underlying decentralized nature of the governance of the DAO vehicle itself, right? So we distinguish here between, on the one hand, the decentralized community in smart contracts, and on the other hand, the real world representation of that community in a legal wrapper, right? They have to be congruent, right? The governance structure of the smart contract driven community, the decentralized community, let's call it DAO, and the real world representation of the legal wrapper and its governance have to be congruent. If they're not, you're creating a vehicle where you constantly have conflict, and you see that the real world representation, the legal representation in the real world, is a centralization, point of centralization, and single point of failure, right, for the DAO itself. So those two are really, really important. So we see legal teams around the world, some of the biggest law firms, they're now in the process of creating DAO, what is called DAO practices, right? And most of this is, we're trying to ram this into a structure that we know and we can deal with, which is dangerous, right? Because then I always encourage these teams to be to paying attention to the internal to the internal governance structure of a DAO and the legal solutions that they're offering to that community, right? There's a lot of things you can do. You can get horribly wrong for the long-term outcomes of this community. So let me go back to this. So there's three in America. So there's Wyoming, where they changed the law, and they now created a DAO law where we have a limited liability entity that allows the use of smart contracts. Now, we can talk about whether that is congruent, this entity, which is the top-down centralized vehicle. The fact that you add a smart contract component under Wyoming law and allow this to be used in a smart contract environment, that's a wonderful start. The question is this vehicle sufficiently, in its own governance structure, sufficiently decentralized to match the decentralized nature of the DAO smart contract environment? And that's a whole nother debate, yeah? Then there is the question of, okay, well, it's legal under Wyoming law in a more centralized legal wrapper environment, but Wyoming law has to play with federal law, right? So you have to have Wyoming law being congruent with federal rules, and the federal rules are absolutely not, right? The federal rules in America that the SEC applies, they will inevitably, in my humble opinion, run into Wyoming law issues. And quite frankly, this is all going to end up in court, right? So somebody will use Wyoming law, believing in what they're selling, right? And they're selling it beautifully. Caitlin Long and all these people are doing a wonderful job there. But eventually, somebody will use this legal construct and run into federal law issues, and that will be litigated in federal court. So whoever does that will probably be stuck in this litigation for 5 to 10 years, and that's great. They're all pioneers. Don't get me wrong. I love that they're doing this work for all of us, for the long-term sustainable applications and uses in this. But it's a risk, right? It's a very risky thing. And the same is very likely going to happen in Pennsylvania and in the state of Washington. Now, what's the solution? How can you move away from these threats under American law? Let me be clear. What is the threat? The threat is at the baseline, right? At the baseline, it's always that a DAO community that uses some form of decentralized governance will be considered a partnership. If they're considered a partnership, what happens is that each person who is a member in the DAO has a voting engagement token or any form of participation will be considered a partner in a partnership, which is the default legal form for an entity that is not otherwise defined and registered under law, under existing law, right? So the default entity is always partnership, and partnerships don't have to be registered. They're just two people or more doing, engaging with each other, and for profit, right? So this is the definition of a partnership: two or more as co-owners for profit, right? If we have two or more as co-owners for profit, under existing law, common law, you need nothing else. Yeah, so that's exactly what DAOs are. Two or more as co-owners for profit. So all these DAOs that are out there that are not otherwise protected by a recognized legal wrapper, they're falling prey, or they're subject to what is called joint and several liability, which is partnership liability, right? Joint and several liability would mean that, let's say Dr. Tammy and I are in a DAO. They could come after her for all the money, every single dollar that is subject to this legal claim, and she would be liable for the entire amount. She would then have a claim against me as a DAO member for half the value that she was held liable for, right? That's a horrible outcome for everybody, yeah? Because nobody will do business this way, because everybody wants the limited liability, right? We all, Dr. Tammy and I, we want to have, in this hypothetical, we want to have the ability to trust that what we do in the DAO doesn't trigger joint and several liability. Yeah, we want to have the ability to confidently be in the marketplace and engage with each other and other communities in smart contracts that are not held liable as partnerships with joint and several liability in existing courts. And this goes back, so this is, by the way, this is a great question. This goes back to what I talked about earlier. We need an alternative legal environment for DAO communities and decentralized communities that use smart contracts. Because otherwise, we are all not engaging with each other because of that uncertainty that we may be held liable jointly and severally as partners, and nobody will do business like that in a DAO environment, right? Nobody would take that risk. So that's why it's so important that we use a proper legal wrapper that is an established legal solution. It's absolutely essential. And two, so we cannot be held jointly and severally liable in DAOs, right? That's the absolute number one item. The next one, and by the way, Wyoming and all the American states, they've started to do that, right? So now we haven't seen this in the courts, so we don't know if the courts will actually recognize this, right? It's a bit of a risk factor in America, doing this business in America. And the second item is we need to have an intra-smart contract dispute resolution mechanism. It cannot be that we need to explain the code and the way the code create solutions, legal solutions, that we cannot transcribe the logic of the code into natural language that we then have to present to a judge in court. That's not a sustainable solution. It's a nightmare, because the way the code is written cannot often properly be fully translated into natural language. And then you have the problem that you have sorry, but that's the reality, unfortunately, often the 65 or older white male sitting there interpreting what this language means, this code means, which governs millions of people in smart contracts, right? So that's a very serious point of failure in my book. So what we need is, and this goes back to the need of decentralized legal solutions, we need a platform of arbitrators who are experts in smart contracts, who can govern and understand what went wrong in a given smart contract. This is also an economizing device. I want to be really clear about this. If you end up litigating this in court, it's just not, even if you do jams or one of those other tools, including under European law of arbitration, just takes too long and it's too expensive. It's way cheaper than courts. It's just still for what we. So a year in crypto is what, 10 years in the real world, right? So it's a little bit.
Yes.
This is not going to work for decentralized communities that are driven by smart contracts. So what we need to build is decentralized infrastructure and a legal system for DAO communities.
So Jodo, did that answer your question? I think it did, man. That was a lot. And I think that's a whole interview in itself, because we got to talk about our co-membership in this DAO. I want to talk more about that. So I just want to make sure Professor Jodo's question was answered before.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really cool answer. Lots of details touching all the vital points there. Thanks.
Thank you. So, oh my goodness. So I'm blown away. But I've got to ask something, because I know our time is just about up, and you've touched on so many things and introduced us to so many things that we definitely will have you back. So I'm just going to say that. And I haven't talked to my co-host or our producer. So I want to just say that I'm going to take the liberty and say that in the future, if you would come back, we'd love to continue this conversation. And so, awesome. Thank you. I'm not even giving him a chance to answer, because I'm just going to assume.
Yeah, we can break it down much more into much more granular topics and really go into it.
Yes.
I'm happy to do it.
Yes, because you've introduced so many things that I want to go deeper, but I know we don't have like 3 hours. This is not a summit. This is actually a show. So I want to ask you at least 2 more questions. And the first, I want you to talk about your book, and tell us about your book. Yes, and show us. How about that? And then Dr.
This is shameless self-promotion here, but I think everybody should have read this book at least once, including some of the people I work with, and you know who you are. Please read the book, okay? So you can say the right things. So yeah.
Yes, because wait, you have two, right? So that's one, and then you have another one, correct?
Yeah, there's many books.
Okay.
I've written about 6 books or so.
Okay. So that's the one you want us to read, though.
Yeah. So this is the book that's really the book about how do DAOs work? How does decentralized governance work in DAOs? And what is the long-term potential? And what are the pitfalls that we need to watch out for? I'm actually in the process of writing, and this is a very academic piece. I apologize to all my readers. This is not easy, nighttime reading. So I'm working on another book that is trying to bring this down a notch, right? Because this is a book that's based on mathematical models and the long-term implications of that governance structure. It comes out of these models, and what does that mean for society? So the next book is going to be, how do you build this, and how do you instantiate this into smart contracts properly? And the book will be written in a simpler fashion. That's at least what I'm trying to do. Doesn't mean I will succeed.
Yeah. So we're gonna get that one, a banner for that one. I don't know if Doc Vince has a banner for that one, but we'll get a banner for that one so we can flash it up here in a minute as well. So Decentralization, Technology's Impact on Organizational and Societal Structure. So yes, so I'm gonna get it. So y'all get it too. And the other thing I want to ask you about is, I know that you're the co-founder of Menagerie. Did I say that right? I don't know if I said it right.
Yeah,
so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Menagerie is the zoo of animals. So I do Menagerie because I believe in what I'm writing in the book, and in order to do what I'm writing in the book, I need to bring the community building barriers to entry and entry level costs down, and that's what Menagerie is all about. So we're giving away free clones of the voting engine for community building. And this entire venture is about long-term sustainable horizontal scaling of communities in work-to-earn models, right? So this Menagerie is about what I talked about 20 minutes ago, which is allowing people to use these governance structures and decentralized structures, bringing in information from the edges of the system for people who don't have agency, and help them horizontally scale. So this is one community being able to very, very inexpensively, if not free, create a new community of people whom they know and trust to provide services to the first community, right? So we're talking about horizontal scaling, to allow these communities, with proper governance, to scale with each other and for each other, and not create the next Facebook, right? So that's really in a nutshell what we're doing here. And yeah, I spend 80% of my time with engineers these days to bring these solutions to market and get the code tested. And I'm excited to talk to anybody about this, because it's the future of, in my humble belief system, is the future for humanity, and how communities help each other and work with each other.
Yes. Oh, I love that. So, okay. So I want to go back to, I know you mentioned this at the beginning, but I want to reiterate it, because part of ICORBP is exposing people to the different opportunities and possibilities in the blockchain industry, and how you can create your space. You can find your place in this space. And I know that, and so I want you to just talk a little bit about your journey. And I know blockchain was around in the 90s, but have you always been in the blockchain space? How did you enter in this space? And of course, now it's evolved where you're talking and doing work around the DAOs and things. But can you just share a little bit on how you transitioned into this space and your connection and your journey?
Gladly. So, full disclosure, I was born and raised in Europe in a system, in a educational system that is very, for lack of a better word, hierarchical and very top down. You comply or you fall out, right? Now there's social systems and insurance systems that catch people, but it's pretty much if you don't perform in it, you're out, right? There's no alternative means. And I was always, I mean, I got through it, but it left scars on me, and scars that I will carry for the rest of my life. So when I came to America, this was literally, you know, sorry, but it's part of the American dream, right? So it was more sun, more freedom, more, you know, I could
perceive that way.
I
Yes.
could breathe here, right? Whereas in the system that I grew up in, I couldn't quite breathe as freely as I wanted to. So no, I was lucky. I had family here, so I was very fortunate. But it took me 22 years to come here to America. So and so I started my career here, and I became a lawyer originally. Finished my PhD in institutional economics, and then started working as a lawyer, Wall Street, right? So very much rat race, very much top down, very much you perform or you're kicked to the curb. And I wanted it more, right? So I worked for Cravath, and Cravath's a great learning experience, but it's, you know, it's a very top down organization. And I was asking for more, so I went to Goldman Sachs, and I got more, and then I got out. And I became an academic, and only as an academic I had the freedom to devote myself to finding new solutions, because that's part of the academic journey, right? You're supposed to create these new things and theorize and then hopefully apply them at some point. Unfortunately, many academics don't apply their insights. So I had the luxury as an academic for about a decade to work in this and come up with new solutions for society. And I had the luxury of working and trying to implement these solutions and seeing if they work and how they work, and collect the data on these solutions for society. And that's how I got to the blockchain space, right? I couldn't have done this without the technology. I couldn't have theorized it without knowing about the technology and its long-term implications. And I couldn't have built all of this without the community support and without being able to work in DAOs and work with technologists and developer teams, right? Guys, this entire space is still nascent, as I said, and we have to be so grateful to the developer communities for allowing us to be here and allowing us to use and build the technology together. So yeah, that's a shortcut on my journey to this, and I will keep doing this as long as I can with Minot.
Awesome. Yes. So thank you so much for sharing that, you know, because I love hearing people's story and how they entered the space, especially when they're not a technologist, right? Yeah. If that's not their first, the first connection to the technology. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. So before we go, I would like you to just share, how can our audience connect with you? How can they follow you? How can they support you? Whatever you need, how can they do that? What is the best way?
The best way is probably social media. There are different, I can put my social stuff in here. It's Wulf Kaal. If you want to get in touch, Telegram, it's very easy, or email, or just social media generally.
Awesome. Awesome. Perfect. So, so make sure y'all get his book, Decentralization, Technology's Impact on Organizational and Societal Structure, and check it out. It's like he said, it's scholarly. However, you'll learn a lot about many of the things that we talked about today. And when we have him back, you can send your questions, and we can make sure that we ask him about those. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to invite Doc Vince back in, and Armando, in case they have any final words before we give you the final word. Hello, how are y'all doing? So any final thoughts, any final words before I turn it over to Dr. Kaal to take us out?
Yeah, I'll give the floor first to Armando. Go ahead, Armando.
Hi guys, I'm so happy that we have Dr. Kaal for this, for this show today. I'm looking forward for his future talks here at the International Council of Registered Blockchain Professional. And I promise, we'll have a meeting, sort of a curriculum meeting, because there are plenty of subtopics within the DAO and within the legal profession that is embracing blockchain technology. So, Dr. Kaal, I'm looking forward to having you here at the International Council of Registered Blockchain Professional, the Black Show.
Glad to join.
Yeah, it's an honor and a privilege having you here, Dr. Carl. And if I'm going to ask a question that would extend more of our time, which we don't have, but all I could do is just again plug this one for our viewers, the book done by you, and it's already available in Amazon. If people would like to purchase it, it's right there in Amazon. And again, thank you, Dr. Carl, for being here. And final thoughts, give the full frame to you.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, I'm good. Yes, let's give the frame to him, not me.
Thank you again for having me. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here, and I would hope to encourage people who are seeing this to figure out ways to work with each other and work in DAO structures. Just experiment. Get on Snapshot. Get on Menagerie. Just experiment and see where you can find your communities that are meaningful to you, that you care about, where you see your own skills being used, and join these communities and start earning a living in DAO communities. Just as I tell my students when I teach my book, go out, find your community. Don't make it a full-time gig, right? You still need to have assurances and in the existing societal structures, but use it and find ways to create and engage with these online communities in which work to earn is possible. And you can create a new life for yourselves. It's hard work, but you can create a new life and more independence. And I believe that this will be a meaningful environment for a lot of people very soon. Thank you for listening.
This blockchain continuing education program is brought to you by our major sponsors: HTML Coin, Utility Coin Beyond the Hype; Althash University, your online school in the fourth industrial revolution; Libra Codes, take control on your NFT creation; and Credence Hub, verified credentials, anytime, anywhere. We also would like to thank our partners.
Hey guys, are you still on?
We're here. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being here. And remember to join us for next week, another episode of The Block. We're here every Friday morning. And so we hope that you'll join us for the next subject matter expert that will join us here on The Block. Thank you all for being here. If you have any questions or comments, post them below, and we'll see you next week.